Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Epstein. So a whole lot of stuff went down yesterday. Emily and I covered the initial emails that were released from the House Oversight Committee. There is a whole lot more that has dropped since then. In fact, people are still going through all of the material that's been released. So we're going to go through as much as we can. We're also going to break down for you the White House's panicked response and how Republicans responded. That discharge petition now has the requisite number of signatures. So a whole lot for us to talk about there. There is other news as well, though. We want to dig into the landscape of the jobs market after a very poor jobs report came out. Also, a fascinating and disturbing look at an Israeli company that has been, bought up a ton of properties here in the U.S. and is just an absolutely terrible landlord, and what that looks like, what the impact it is having on our country. We're also taking a look at the way the billionaires are reacting to Zoran's victory in New York City, and also got some interesting comments from Lena Khan about her role on the transition team there, which is kind of fascinating as well. And today, Starbucks workers are going on strike. We are going to have one of the leaders of that strike here in, not here in studio, but live, in spirit, in essence. In spirit, she'll be in studio, talking to us about what they're going on strike for and what they're hoping to accomplish. So very interesting one today.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you to everybody who has been subscribing. BreakingPoints.com. If you can help support the show, we deeply appreciate it if you are able to. If not, no worries. Please just go ahead and hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, please send an episode to a friend or rate us 5 stars. It really helps the show grow. Here, the Epstein stuff here today. I know a lot of people are interested in that who may not even be necessarily interested in politics. It's a perfect episode to go ahead and send to a friend. Point. So, all right, let's go ahead and start then with the Trump White House panicked reaction to the Epstein Files, acting guilty as hell, if I might say, with their initial reaction, working incredibly hard to try and stop a discharge petition from hitting the House floor, which would require a release of the Epstein Files. So this was their initial reaction to those releasing of the emails. Here is what they had to say.
Can you address their substance? Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong.
Why not just go ahead, release the full files on Epstein, get this all over with?
This administration has done more with respect to transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein than any administration ever. And it was CBS's own reporting, Ouija, that recently wrote that Ms. Guffrey maintained, and God rest her soul, that she maintained that there was nothing inappropriate she ever witnessed, that President Trump was always extremely professional and friendly to her.
If the president is considering a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell?
Again, he's answered this repeatedly. It's not something he's talking about or even thinking about at this moment in time. I can assure you of that.
All right, so that's their reaction there in terms of their, we've done absolutely nothing wrong. These emails prove nothing other than the fact that he did absolutely nothing wrong. I don't know about that, all right? I mean, look, I was willing to believe, here's the theory, and I think this is a reasonable one. Mm-hmm. Trump's been on the scene since, 2015, mm-hmm. right? You're like, if anything had come out, it would have come out, right? He's one of the most heavily scrutinized people. You've got all these Me Too lawsuits, etc. It's not exactly like he was a choir boy in his tabloid lifestyle, so it seemed like whatever was out in the open was out in the open. But man, I mean, you read some of this stuff, and we're going to spend a decent amount of time here. It's not looking good there for Mr. Trump. At the very least, it does prove. At the very least, their behavior only validates what could be the theory behind it, right?
Yes.
About running scared, in my opinion, and I think any reasonable person could see that. We had the letter that initially came out from Trump, which said, or the letter, the drawing or whatever from the birthday book. They said it was fake. It was obviously real. It's been vindicated as real ever since then. Not that MAGA's ever acknowledged that, but the release a lot of these emails just suggests like a very close, intimate relationship. Could Epstein have been bullshitting? Yeah, maybe, but at this point, you basically have no choice but to fully release everything if you actually want to be, quote, vindicated, and we're whipping this hard against it. I don't know how a reasonable person couldn't say it does look like you're at trying to cover up something. I don't really have another explanation for it. Do you?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, you put together what we're going to go through that has been revealed in these emails, which is highly suggestive and suggestive of a longer term relationship. Remember, Trump said that he had cut off all relations, all, friendship, any sort of communication with Epstein long ago. These emails would certainly seem to indicate otherwise. That's number one. So you put together, some of the content of the emails with the incredibly guilty, panicked way that they're reacting to this vote that could potentially in the future lead to a further Epstein Files release. And you put that together with the cushy treatment of Ghislaine Maxwell, who's sitting in Club Fed playing with puppies and getting special meals and filing her application for a commutation of her sentence. Why? Because he's afraid of what she has on him, what she could say. It appears she was leaking to the press. I mean, I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption at this point, not proven, but reasonable. Those leaks stopped once she got her special treatment. And so they're trying to keep her quiet. They're trying to keep the Republicans in line and failing, by the way, and, acting guilty as hell while more and more comes out as people are going through these emails about what Trump knew, what Epstein thought he had on Trump. I mean, he outright says, I could destroy him. Mm-hmm. Like, I have, dirt on him that could end his political career. He says, I'm the only one, effectively, who could do that. So, yeah, it's, and all those, libs of TikTok and all these people are very interested in this stuff. Suddenly they got nothing to say.
Yes,
nothing to say.
A friend of mine asked me about it yesterday, and I said, here was the stupidity of these people, is they believe that when we said the richest and most powerful, they were like, oh, well, that's just Democrats. And the whole point was it was never just Democrats.
Right.
And I mean, no one's whitewashing Democrat, Larry Summers, Bill Clinton, and all that stuff over here. We'll show all of it. Listen, in the next segment about emails, I'm going to go through all of these like titans of industry, donors, Larry Summers, Clinton, all these other folks that were ensnared, in the Epstein story. I have no problem talking about that. I don't even think a lot of the liberals who are now interested or have any issues talking about that either. The issue here is the centrality of Trump himself. And I think, his best case could probably be, well, I knew he liked young girls. It was a different time. Yes, I fooled around with many women, and Epstein was aware of that. But he chose instead to be like, oh, I threw him out of Mar-a-Lago because I said he was a creep.
Barely knew him. Threw him out of Mar-a-Lago.
I barely knew him. It's like, this is just obviously not true, okay? And that's really what the email, look, the emails only validate. There's photos, right? There's the NBC News report. There's the quote of like, Jeffrey likes him young. He has a very active social life that he gave in 2002. Like, these are all on the record. It was already well established.
Creepy ass birthday book contribution.
The birthday book thing. When was that? 2006, right? So you can see, like, this wasn't that long ago. It was like 20 some years ago. Not to mention not only the letter from the Trump birthday book, you remember the whole like the gifting of the girlfriend thing with the check signed by Trump, which was also in the birthday book.
Referenced in these emails
it's referenced in the emails. Let's just get to what Trump said here about the Epstein thing. Let's put that up here on the screen. This was an initial truth. The Democrats are trying to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein hoax again because they'll do anything at all to deflect how badly they've done on the shutdown, so many other subjects. Only a very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap. The Democrats cost our country some $1.5 trillion with their recent antics of viciously closing our country. They should pay a fair price. There should be no deflections to Epstein or anything else. Any Republican involved should be focused only on opening up our country and fixing the massive damage caused by the Democrats. So this was in response to a few of those Republicans who ended up signing that discharge petition. And that discharge petition, by the way, does now have the requisite 218 votes. Thomas Massey says that even if a representative were to die, that their signature will live in the petition. So that's a discharge petition.
They can't kill anyone to fix their problem.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting about discharge. Discharge petitions are quite rare. They're famously, it was used in the Civil Rights Act. It's one of those things where 218 votes, you need a majority of people to vote in order to circumvent leadership. It's actually very hard to do, to get 218 signatures on a discharge petition. So it just shows you how extraordinary this thing is. Massey also indicating that some 40 or 50 Republicans will probably end up voting for the Epstein resolution, despite the fact the White House is whipping so hard against this. Let me put the next one up here on the screen, just again to show you the extraordinary measures that the Trump White House is using. So quote, Trump ramps up the pressure on the GOP to thwart an Epstein vote. So two of the individuals, Representative Nancy Mace and Representative Lauren Boebert, signed the vote on releasing the Epstein position because, of course, they were people who not only talked about it like a lot over the last few years, and they wanted to be consistent. They were summoned. Boebert was summoned to the White House Situation Room. All right, the White House Situation Room. That is not normal. Like, let me just explain here. Like, Situation Room briefings are for something that can only take place in a SCIF. What is it? Secure, compartmentalized information facility. You can't bring your phone in. If you just watch House of Dynamite, right? There you go. So that's what the White House Situation Room. It has a variety of. It's like a whole complex down in there in the White House. A lot of briefing rooms, meeting rooms. But in that same day, she was summoned to a meeting with the Attorney General and the FBI Director. So these are the top law enforcement officials of the whole United States government are sitting in the White House Situation Room providing a briefing. I'm like, okay, so what does that all tell you? You've got very sensitive information that being briefed here to a member of Congress, presumably, with a security clearance. Honestly, when I see something like that, I'm like, that's just flashing intel, right? Anything that's unclassified, normal political meeting, there's a shitload of meetings in the rooms in the White House, okay? There's an entire complex of the EEOB. There's a lot of meeting space over there. I've been down there. There's so many meetings that can happen in a non-classified setting. So the fact that this happened in the Situation Room really was like a whoa moment for me.
Right.
Because I'm like, wow. So this goes to classified setting. They don't want her to bring a briefing, or they don't want to bring her phone in. Presumably, she probably didn't have any staff that were allowed in there. This is like clearance to the max type of thing. And I actually don't think the press is doing a good enough job about explaining how crazy it is to bring someone to the White House Situation.
How absolutely extraordinary. And the reason is the clock was ticking to 4 o'clock. Because remember, first of all, Mike Johnson shut down the House entirely
for 50-something days.
A ridiculous amount of time just to forestall this potential discharge petition. Then Adelita Grijalva was elected almost 2 months ago. And he's just like, not going to swear her in. Just not going to swear her in because she would be that 218th vote. So finally, with actually the end of the shutdown, he could no longer justify putting that off. And so she was going to be sworn in at 4 o'clock and sign on to the discharge petition immediately. And so the clock was ticking down to 4 o'clock. And the Trump and, his administration cronies, full court press. I can only imagine the level of pressure that was exerted on Nancy Mace and on Lauren Boebert and whoever else they thought they might be able to get to withdraw their name and to cave. And at the end of the day, they didn't. None of the Republicans took their name off, which is an incredible sign, I think, of the weakness of this White House at this point. I think but maybe even just weeks ago before the election results, you might have been able to bully some of your Republicans who have signed onto this petition to walk away from it. But now Trump's popularity is going down and down and down. You've got Americans who are very unhappy with the economy. You've got so many of these people talk so much about the Epstein Files and have so much of their reputation on the line with regard to how they handle all of this. And so all of them held firm. Boebert put out a pretty entertaining, honestly, tweet after this full court press came from the White House. She says, I want to thank White House officials for meeting with me today. Together, we remain committed to ensuring transparency for the American people with the little American flag emoji. Translation being, sorry, not going to bend, keeping my name on here. Thanks for your time. Thanks for wasting your time.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting. Boebert has been out of the news kind of lately over the last 2 years. She was like one of our
Beetlejuice.
There's no more Beetlejuice. Man, she inspired my Beetlejuice costume 2 years ago. Shout out to Lauren for that one. But it is interesting to me that she is sticking with this. But also, I mean, if you're a Republican, if you're MTG, Lauren Boebert, remember, Lauren Boebert barely won re-election. You remember how close that race was? It was like 2 or 3 points. It was nothing, right?
Yeah.
And her antics really, I think, cost her. Part of the reason why she's been a little bit more silent. But if you're MTG, Boebert, Boebert, any of these people, you got to run for re-election again. Like, you know, MTG, for example, I'm not saying she'll lose her district, but Georgia, look at what just happened with those power elections. You got 2 Democratic senators repping the state. You got, you know, Democrats who are on the rise. You've got your own political future here to worry about. And so the White House is not nearly as powerful. Trump is acting like a real lame duck lately in a way that I don't think a lot of people are fully appreciating. And the fact that he lost this actually does demonstrate, in my opinion, some of the lack of hold he's going to lose, or the hold that he's going to lose increasingly.
A lame duck. I mean, really, he's starting to be a lame duck.
Well, he is quite literally a lame duck running for office. And then, you know, the more, look at W's hold on the party after 06. People were like, yeah, thanks for calling, Mr. President. You know, I don't care what you really have to say.
So the 4 Republicans who signed on were Massey, who, of course, partnered with Ro Khanna and has really been, you know, leading the charge here, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then the 2 that we just mentioned, Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace. So I think the White House knew there was no chance they were going to get MTG, certainly not Thomas Massey. That ship has sailed. So those were the 2. And apparently what it looked like is that Nancy Mace just basically didn't answer their calls. It was just like, yeah, I'm just not going to pick up the phone right now. And so they were the 2 that made 218. There is another Democrat who's likely to be sworn in, I think, in January. So even if they got Boebert off of the discharge petition, which obviously they failed to do, then in, you know, another month or 2, you're going to have another Democrat who comes into the House who would have still made 218. But, you know, it's also interesting that they are so threatened by this because, number one, I mean, it's their government who has control over these documents. Like, does anyone here think that they would be above, like, messing with it and scrubbing them of any sort of unflattering information that could come out? I certainly don't think that they're above that. The amount of material you're talking about here, though, makes that job very difficult to be able to effectively do. So obviously they're worried about what may be contained in whatever government information exists about Jeffrey Epstein, which, you know, given Ryan and Maz's reporting over at DropSite about all the intel connections and just absolutely confirming he was an Israeli intel asset. Also, by the way, he was talking to the Russians. I mean, he was, you know, any sort of power broker in the world that he could ingratiate himself with, he was certainly doing that. So no doubt the CIA has files. We know the FBI has files. Like, they have financial records. Like, there is a lot of information that our government has about this man. But in any case, you know, so number one, you think, okay, well, they've got some time to, like, scrub out whatever it is they don't want to come forward, and nobody thinks that they're above that. Number 2, it still has to pass the Senate. And then even
Trump would have to sign it.
And then even if it gets through the Senate, Trump still has to sign it, and he's not going to. So then you have to, how many votes do you have to get in the Senate to overcome
60.
a veto? 60 or 66?
Well, to overcome a veto. Yeah, that would be 66.
66, right? Yeah, so, I mean, very unlikely that you would be actually able to get 66 members of the Senate to go against Trump and override his veto. But in the meantime, you have this story that is just festering, and more stories like what we're talking about today of just incredibly guilty behavior. You have every Republican, both in the House and in the Senate, having to go on the record of trying to, like, protect a pedophile, protect a global ring of pedophile elites, not exactly votes that they want to take. So I think that explains why, even though it is very unlikely that we actually get to a point where, you know, this succeeds in the House, succeeds in the Senate, Trump signs it, or they overcome a veto, it's very unlikely for all of those things to happen. But in the meantime, it's just political hell for every Republican involved.
Oh, I mean, obviously, that's why they didn't want to do it. Who would want to be the person who has to vote against this? Like, good luck to you.
Yeah.
By the way, anybody want to remind me about some senators who are up for re-election, let's say in a year, in 2026? Like, why would you gift that to your opponent? If you're running against Sherrod Brown, good luck. You know, if you're running in some of these closer races, if you're John Ossoff or any of these folks, this is great fodder for you to be like, I voted for the release. And this is what, again, these MAGA folks for weeks, remember, they were like, MAGA forgives Trump on Epstein Files. And I was like, here's what you guys didn't understand. There is a whole cohort of people who definitely voted MAGA or were MAGA adjacent in 2024 because MAGA was seen as a revolutionary kind of insurrectionist movement against the establishment. Epstein was a actually a big part of that, because it was like, he's different. He's going to release the Epstein Files because he's saying, I'm above the fray of this like global ring of elites, right? And so when they started doing the cover up, that was actually a major disillusionment, I think, for a lot of younger people. I would say especially young men. I mean, if you already feel like the system is rigged against you and that people in high places do stuff that you could never imagine, and you saw Eyes Wide Shut, and your life is being disenfranchised, it's like, not only is it easy to believe, it's actually quite literally true in this case. Well, when you start acting like that, those people, and in particular, covering up any of the Israel connections and any of that stuff, you're like, new boss, same as the old boss. That's, I mean, if anything, you ask me where Trump's real like fault comes from in terms of like a lot of his political popularity. It's the new boss, same as the old boss mentality. Like, Israel war continues, Ukraine war unsolved. A lot of the foreign policy looks cookie cutter, neocon, just like out of the last administration or anything. I keep saying he's like Biden. That's the whole problem, is if people hate Biden, they don't want anything like that. Oh, actually, your life is fine. Let me show you some bullshit chart about why the S&P 500 is up, and that means that your life is getting better. No, that's quite literally the opposite. And I could go on, in every facet of this. I'm just talking about Epstein. Brett Weinstein, a major Maha guy. He was recently on Rogan. He's like, yeah, Maha's been, failure. Like, basically, whenever it comes to RFK Jr., right? Obviously. And for them, mRNA was like a big thing. Like RFK being like, I'm going to withdraw the mRNA vaccine. It has not happened. Like, literally, period. End of story. They can end up make all kinds of excuses and talk about food dyes and Steak and Shake all you want. Like, the singular thing that you said was going to happen quite literally didn't happen. Tulsi's the DNI director. She was supposed to come in and be a bomb thrower, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She barely exists.
Yeah, exactly. Where is she? Well, everything. All my reporting suggests is she's out on the outs, all right? CIA director John Ratcliffe, who's like much more of an establishment guy, he sees control. She, Trump is mad at her about the Hiroshima video. She's like a side character fighting for relevance right now. So that's just with this, stacking on top of each other, like the more revolutionary parts, so-called, of MAGA and all that. It's been a year, like the rubber hit the road, and now you kind of know who's running the show. So that's why I think the Epstein story continues to matter. And I mean,
it's such a blow to his brand.
Yeah, exactly.
And nobody gets how important a brand is more than Donald Trump. And it is, it's a devastating blow to his brand as this renegade outsider going to expose the corrupt elite. Like, think about the fantasies of QAnon, and the storm is coming, and all this idea that all the corrupt elites were going to be swept up and arrested, and it was going to be a new day, and this sort of moral cleansing and purification was going to occur. And then it's like, no, actually, this guy is not only going to cover up the Epstein Files, but he is in like all over the Epstein Files. He was this man's bestie for years and years and years. And you don't think there was going to be anything there on him? Obviously, not to mention he always acted weird and shady when he would get asked directly about it. He could never give a straightforward, like, unequivocal answer when he would get asked about, are you going to release the JFK files? Yes, absolutely. Are you going to release the Epstein files? Well, maybe less so. There may be other, I don't want innocent people to be harmed, blah, blah, blah. So, it was always there if you wanted to open your eyes and see it, but a lot of people did not. And so, to your point about the damage to his presidency, again, sort of like with the authoritarianism, you know what? People would put up with a lot of him being shady and buddies with Jeffrey Epstein and all over these emails and whatever, if they were like, but I can buy a house. But, my kids' lives look great now. Their jobs are not actually going to be stolen by a band of robots that are going to destroy society. My electric bill is going down, actually. Like, life is measurably better in, ways that I am experiencing personally. If people felt like things were going great, and yeah, I guess the president was like, at the very least, knew about this ring, pedophile ring, and at the worst was directly implicated in it. What are you going to do, right? It's the guy we got. At least my life is getting better. But when the president's a creep, the economy is cratering, and you've got all this authoritarian bullshit, mass thugs in the streets and all of that nonsense as well, and the foreign policy landscape is an utter and complete disaster. Like, when you put all of that to, what are you giving people to hang on to? Some, like, owning the libs, quote unquote, based social media videos and an announcement about Steak and Shake? Like, that's what we're supposed to hang our hat on here, is the golden age. Oh, congratulations. So, and I think for the podcast world in particular, Epstein obviously was a major focal point, and it just was impossible for them to really defend. So, in terms of the, some of the podcast bros that were directly supportive of Trump, going into this election, that really was the start of them having to start to say some critical things and having to turn in a somewhat different direction, which is influential. I mean, I'm not saying they're like the only reason he got elected, but they do have power in society, and especially with this group of young men who were very important in the Trump coalition.
That's what people just, really just don't get. And so, bringing back to the point, I actually think one of Trump's powers, superpowers always, was like a directional honesty, is that he would lie but kind of tell the truth. And so, for example, do you remember like in the 2015 campaign, that famous line when he was like, "You think we're so innocent?" They confronted, and it was like, wow, like nobody talks like that.
Yeah.
No American president has been like, "Yeah, we're shady too," right? And everyone was like, "Yeah, exactly, he's right." On a lot of his divorces and his own conduct, for years, one of the superpowers was he had no shame. He would just call the New York Post. I mean, don't you remember some of those headlines like "best sex I ever had" or whatever with Marla Maples?
But he would pretend to be his
he would pretend to
PR
be his PR guy, right? He was absolutely shameless, and that's why people were like, "Oh, he's lewd and cheats on his wife." He's like, "Yeah, so?" He's like,
he never hid it.
He never hid anything. So even here, if he was like, "Yeah, I was friends with him. I had a some line about I had a rambunctious youth," even though he's like 55 at the time.
I mean, that's
of some
like
of
what
stuff.
RFK Jr. did,
Exactly.
and it kind of works,
It happened with me. I interviewed RFK, and I was like, "Hey, like this nanny says that you groped her or whatever," and he's like, "I had a crazy youth." I was like, "Wow, what an answer!"
He was like 40 or whatever.
Yeah, I was like, "Whoa," but I mean, it worked, right? And so for Trump, like that's a twice divorced man who owned Miss Universe pageants and has a long history from the tape of 2016 and prior. Like that's part of the reason I don't think the tape was the hit that most people thought. He's like, he never pretended to be anything that he wasn't. But in this case, he actually did kind of pretend, right? He was friends with Epstein. It's obvious. It's not a good look. You could just say something like, "Yeah, we party, we chase girls together, but I never knew or saw anything crazy." At this point, though, doubling, tripling down, and especially, I think, by the way, it's not just about Trump, because Trump, as you say, is always kind of ambiguous. I think it's like Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and Jade, all these other people who used Epstein to political advantage to rally people to their cause, and then they're silent, right? And that I actually think really rubs people
or directly
the
implicated in
wrong
the
way.
cover-up like Kash.
Right, and so that's what really bugs. I mean, can I say, like for me in particular, watching like Kash and all them literally go on podcasts, tours talking about, we know exactly where the Epstein Files are, and then, bro, you come into office and you say, "Believe me, I would tell you," with your bug eyes.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I don't believe you. Actually.
Pam Bondi.
Right. Pam Bondi.
I'm sitting on my
desk. I have them on my desk, right?
And then weeks later, actually there are no Epstein Files and there's nothing to see here when we're moving on.
So it's like, well, when were you lying? Because you did lie. There's no world where you didn't lie. Then you put some of the facts and all that stuff together. So yeah, not years, it's only been a year.
It feels like years.
But for weeks, there was this whole discourse about how MAGA doesn't care about Epstein. And maybe that's true. But this is what I always say. MAGA did not win Trump the election. All right? MAGA's only like 33% of the country. 80-something million people did vote for Donald Trump. He won a popular vote victory in the election. Not all of them are MAGA. Go ask them. They'll tell you I'm not MAGA, or I'm an independent, or I was voting for this, that, and that reason. The coalition that they were the most proud of, and they should be proud when young people vote for you. I think that's inspiring because it's just like, oh, the next generation believes in the stuff that I have to say. I think this is important to them. I think it's important to them. I think our show, our long focus on Epstein, and of course, I mean, I won't lie, we've been rewarded for it, a lot through ratings and through all this other stuff. I think it's because the reason why it became a podcast thing is because, by the way, even to this day, you can't go on CNN and just say he was an Israeli asset. Like even then, people would go, "What? Without evidence, sir, you're speaking," right? Like that's why it goes big on the podcast, because we can just speak the way that every normal person can look at the facts.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
Right.
The New York Times, I mean, one of the things that comes out of these emails is that you have a New York Times reporter who worked there for like 15 years, who's basically working with Epstein to try and quash different stories and talking about blackmail. It's like, bro, what the fuck?
Well, and that gets to the point of, you were saying, your assumption was basically like, listen, they've been out to get Trump, they've been wanting to take down Trump for a long time. Yeah. If there was something would have come out. But that discounts how much these media outlets were implicated, in terms of the cover-up. It of course, erases the number of Democrats who are involved here as well. And so I think it's the case that there was just a bipartisan disinterest, like directly, to going in their own self-interest. Like, we're just gonna not talk about this. One of the emails is where Epstein and Michael Wolff are going back and forth about like, oh, I think CNN in 2015 is going to ask Trump a question about you. And so they're like brainstorming, you know, well, what would be the perfect answer? And by the way, Wolff, I think it is, suggests that hopefully Trump will say some things that are untrue because then you'll have leverage on him. I mean, directly plotting, like, here's how we're gonna, this president is compromised, and it'd be good for us, or this potential president at that point is compromised, it'd be good for us if we have some dirt on him and we can use it to our own advantage here. But in any case, CNN didn't ask that question. So
yeah, I noticed
isn't
that too.
interesting?
Yeah,
they didn't end up asking that question. So somewhere along the way, if they were planning to, that particular question got spiked and didn't make it in. So that's why we can be all these years later and you feel like you must know everything there is to know about Donald Trump, and we're learning more and more and more.
Yeah, I'm not cynical enough because, intellectually, you read the Manson book, right? The Tom, God, I'm totally blanking on the name, but it's an incredible book. You read Tom O'Neill, that's his name, the guy who wrote the book. You read that Manson book and you're like, wow, so even 40 years later, people will cover this shit up. And intellectually, I know JFK, for example, it's been 60 something years since the assassination. And even though we basically know, the cover up and the plots and all of that, but we don't know for sure, right? Like we know enough to reasonably guess, and I say it obviously points in one direction, but in real time, it's like, even when you're a very cynical person like me, you're like, oh, yeah, I assumed something would have come out, by now. And now I'm like, I don't know, man. So, look at the CNN stuff, the New York Times, and you're like, yeah, it's like, to borrow my own words, when we said the richest and most powerful people, we meant it. And it really is a conspiracy of silence, of intelligence, of just like the sketchiest stuff. And what comes through to the emails to me, and again, I knew this at an intellectual level, but the depraved nature through which these guys act in private is so disgusting. I don't care what time it is, like what time period, and even if it was 20 years ago, like when you read that birthday book, remember that one about the guys with masks on talking about rape fantasies? You're like, I'm sorry, like that's not normal. Like that's really not normal, and psychotic
90%
and violent
of the birthday book entries
are like
all about his sex life and and what it was for his 50th birthday, is that right? It's like, disgusting. That was like when that came out, I was like, oh, QAnon was actually kind of low-key on something. That's
what I'm saying.
You talking about directional correct.
Yes,
but they were just wrong to put Trump as their hero at the center of that story. And I think, some of them are realizing that. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene was a QAnon person, and now here she is signing on to the discharge petition, very much at odds with Trump and kind of in the crosshairs from the administration. But, when you think about Trump's life and the characters he ran with, not just Epstein, John Casablancas, who was pioneer in making the modeling industry basically like a global human trafficking industry and exploiting these young girls, known pedophile himself. And Trump was close with him. And, Trump had his own modeling agency and, reportedly modeled some of his practices after Casablancas. Puts his own daughter, by the way, in this industry when she's like 13, 14 years old, which given what you had to know about it is so just beyond disturbing. He bragged about, in his beauty pageants, how he could go in and since he owned them, he could go into the dressing room and check out all these girls. There's this reporting about the party that he threw that was supposed to be with all these models, young models, and a bunch of VIPs, and then the only person he invites is Jeffrey Epstein. All these girls who thought that this was going to be their break, and there'd be a bunch of like rich, famous, influential people that they could, get hired for gigs, et cetera. And then it's just freaking Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. We know without a doubt that they were super close friends for years and years. All of this is out there. Trump himself confirmed that Virginia Giuffre worked at Mar-a-Lago, and Ghislaine Maxwell comes in and, and takes her, and that's how she ends up being in the Epstein world and herself being trafficked and abused. So, once you start to open your eyes to all of these things, and then it just really and then we'll get into the emails here, it really bears underscoring why this matters. Obviously, from a moral character perspective, It matters a lot. Okay, that's one thing. We're talking about a president of the United States who was compromised by an Israeli intelligence asset. That's what we're talking about here. I mean, whatever Trump is afraid of coming out right now, he knew that Jeffrey, whatever deep, dark secrets he has that he doesn't want to come out, which I think is undeniable at this point, given what we know and his behavior, he knew that Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell, by the way, had that information on him. And you have to assume, whether it's true or not, that that information was shared with the Israelis. You have to assume that. We know, and Ryan brought this up, that the Israelis used the Monica Lewinsky tapes against Clinton.
That's true.
To coerce his behavior. Oh, you think they're above? Of course not. Like that's their whole MO. So we have in the White House, it looks like someone who is compromised by Israel. And you know, there was all the Russiagate stuff in the first administration theorized. And by the way, you know, there's also emails here between Epstein talking about his, like, you know, diplomacy with Russian leaders as well. So I think it actually is fair to assume that Trump thinks that they probably do have something on him as well. But, you know, in a lot of ways, everybody was looking in the wrong direction. So that's why, you know, the Trump focus here is so important, because this is such an I mean, this is the president of the United States, maybe the most powerful person in the world. And you have to assume that he thinks Israel has some sort of devastating dirt on him.
And there's only one way to prove that you don't, which is by releasing it all. That's the only way at this point to prove that you don't. And I think that's why,
and
I mean,
instead,
look,
go
I
to
get it.
extraordinary lengths.
I know that
make
this
sure
stuff
nothing
sounds
comes
outlandish,
out.
but it's like, dude, you know, if you look like you're in full-blown cover-up here, you know, either for yourself or your friends or whatever, it's like, yeah, this is politics. People are going to assume the absolute worst. Like, you set up the conditions through which people are going to assume that type of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, it's dark. It's very, very dark. Okay, let's move on to the email, shall we?
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.